Well, hey folks, it's your old pal, King Waspinator. Welcome back to Total Party Skills. Hit the buttons of choice below, and Happy New Year. 2022 is upon us. Before I do anything else, I just want to give a little sneak preview of some of the things that I'm going to be doing with my own games. For those of you who are still relatively new to the channel and are not yet aware because you haven't seen any of the videos about them in the backlog, I have 7 different core game setting titles, core rule books, and most of them have at least 1 or 2 source books so far, and I'm about to start another wave of source materials, and I have also a couple other core books I'm going to be adding over the course of this year. Try to get it up to 10 basic titles, and from that point out, just kind of stick on just doing source book material for them for a while until something occurs to me that's like, oh, there's a genre that I've somehow managed to overlook, kind of a thing. The source books I want to do in the second wave, I'm going to make them a bit more generically formatted so that each one can be paired up with 1 or 2 or maybe 3 different of the core books, depending on how you want to use it. Right off the bat, we got Cyber Psionic Bionic Cyborgs, which will be for use with either Escape from Planet Matriarchy or Rocket Cadets of the 11th Dimension. That one is going to both present rules for making, cybernetic characters with robotic enhancements and the kind of a merging of both the living human and the artificial starship kind of rules to kind of see what we get out of that. And also, the kind of strange pseudo-psychic abilities that one could have for having computers and modems and whatnot in their nervous system, and how they can communicate with each other and do those sorts of things, take over machines, direct uplink to the internet, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to do a book basically about the dark history of the cult of Anubis. That's going to tie pretty directly to both the escape or expedition to ancient Egypt and the Ghosts of the Shadow Zone settings. So that one's going to kind of just span the history of the early cult of Anubis in ancient Egypt all the way to the more modern embedded cult of Anubis that's hiding in this larger international society of Satanists and bankers. Let's see what else I got. Canadian Elf Apocalypse is going to be both for Dracula's Carpathian Christmas and for Amazon Time Barbarians. And I'm probably going to do a book. I'm probably just going to call it something cheesy like Cowgirl Encounters, which will be a follow-up for Cowgirls versus Zombies. A book that is like a limited concept, and so it's not going to get a whole ton of support material, but I at least want to put out just a little thin something that gives you just a bunch of different encounters and adventure ideas you can use for your Cowgirls to go up against some zombies and fight their way out of 1866 Colorado. DM Kurt had asked about it, and I'd already been kind of toying a little bit with the idea in my head, so I'm going to go ahead and move forward with it, and I already have written the introduction out for it. But I'm going to do a adaptation of Orc and Bone to basically have an alternate version of it using my rule system. That's not going to invalidate the first Orc and Bone book, which is an OSR D20 style write-up. I'm going to have it be a bit of a prequel, set at the immediate aftermath of humanity's disappearance, when the orcs first, enter the heartlands of the old human empire. And so you'll have a different perspective for your characters. I'm probably going to have it set up where everyone is playing orcs as their main character, although I'm kind of toying with the idea of having some sort of sidekick thing going on like you have in more recent versions of D&D. And because it's set apart from the events and setting that's depicted in the first Orc and Bone, they shouldn't invalidate each other at all. The stuff described in Orc and Bone 2 is not gonna is really just all just background stuff that leads up to an Orc and Bone campaign if you're using D20 rules. And if you wanted to use the Total Party System version, you can still make some use of the original Orc and Bone because it gives you kind of a map to the future of how this setting's going to evolve, so you kind of have an idea of what's going to end up starting to appear where. And I'm going to call it something really dumb like Orc plus Bone 2 Revisioned. Kind of it's my own little personal nod to the Matrix movies. Your sequel, Orc and Bone 2, is a prequel, all that kind of stuff. I think that's fun, so we're going to go with that. Another book I want to put out that I've hinted at in some of the other books I've put out so far which I'm going to try to have out by Valentine's Day, is a Lady Spy Detective. Similar to Cowgirls vs. Zombies, it's a relatively simple, straightforward premise. The idea behind that is it's a game for a game master and one player. Specifically, it's a game that game masters can play with their spouse or girlfriend. Because, you know, the characters are lady spy detectives. It'll be set in like the 1950s, a little bit of, you know, like pulp girl power. You're in on a world that's still like, what was that show on AMC about? It's still a bit Mad Men kind of an environment, you know, in terms of like, you know, like honest, open sexism in the setting. But, you know, it's one of those kinds of empowerment stories from back then where, you know, you're the journalist or you're the detective and you're going to stick it to the man and solve the mystery anyway, where the focus is much more on outwitting your opponents and less so much on just raw fisticuffs. And just to kind of fill a niche for, you know, people who want to, you know, game masters of any gender who want to, you know, just run a game for their loved one. It seems like a good thing to put out for Valentine's Day, so that's coming, Lady Spy Detective. And the other book, which I have mostly written, but then we had the whole thing with the move, so I haven't gotten back around to finishing it yet. But, you know, it's a chunk of the way there. I just got to go and finish off the last few chapters at some point. But it's going to be Pax Luporum, Werewolves of the Republic, where you're taking my style of werewolves for my games and basically making a Roman Republic setting. It's going to be set around the year 250 BC, so it's before Rome became an empire, just slightly prior to the First Punic War, kind of when the Roman Republic itself was at its height, had control of Italy, but it hadn't yet like exploded all across the Mediterranean basin. Kind of a point where Rome was respected and feared, but people hadn't like, you know, grown to hate them yet. And the werewolves are kind of at the core of politics and the Republic. And there's going to be also other kinds of supernatural creatures. It's kind of in some ways my answer to the thing that people wanted from White Wolf games was, you know, people generally wanted to have the mix and match where you have a werewolf and a vampire and a mage and all kind of working together, but instead you can choose one of 12 different vampires or one of 13 different wolves or one of 14 different mages, and they don't really mix very well. I'm peeling back all the stuff like there's just the one werewolf, there's just the one kind of vampire, there's just the one kind of whatever. And so it makes it more easy for integrated player character groups. It's more designed for integrated player character groups, although it's not the exact same collection of races. There is going to be werewolves, there is going to be vampires. I'm going to include, finally have rules for playable Olympians. I was going to include sea people, aka mermen or mermaids, who've, you know, had went through some genetic alterations to like make themselves appear more human and breathe air and stuff and live amongst us. And ghosts will be around. It is going to be a bit of a kind of also a slight repackaging of the Ghosts of the Shadow Zone setting, but for, you know, classic era type games. So you can also use some of the information in that to go along with your ancient Egypt campaign and all that. But anyway, that's basically the, you know, what's coming down the pipeline. So, you know, follow links in the description box below and see what kind of titles I have, so you can go ahead and get on the Total Party train before we get to the next stop and all that good stuff. Also, you know, words, enjoy your new year, hit like, hit subscribe, tell your friends all about the wonder and joy that is Total Party Skills, and be sure to stay waspinated.